1985, I got a new little brother. Well, technically he wasn't new because he was not a newborn. He was a stepbrother. My dad and his mom met, they fell in love, and I was gifted with this little butterball of a being. Now, prior to my little brother, I had two little sisters, but I had always craved that energy of having a little brother to boss around and teach how to play sports and teach how to have fisticuffs the way that my older brothers had taught me. And so when Shaka came into my life, I was overwhelmed with joy. But as blended families go, it was not a seamless relationship. We were getting to know each other. I was getting used to having this little invasive species take up space in my room and try on my sneakers and all the cool things that you want to keep your younger siblings away from. But he was my little brother nonetheless. In 1991, about 6 years after we met, I was arrested and sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison. And I remember my little brother being brought up to see me on a visit. And it was the first time that he really expressed and articulated how great of a big brother that I was and how much he would miss me. And as you can imagine, that was heartbreaking. Throughout the course of my incarceration, I would call home and occasionally catch him and we would talk. And I watched him begin to grow up. And I watched him to begin to navigate some things in life that I wish as a big brother I was there to hold his hand through and walk him through. In 2010, after 19 years in prison, when I walked out, unfortunately, what I learned is that my brother was on his way into prison. I was devastated. I felt like I had failed as a big brother to give him the guidance and the wisdom to avoid the things that I had went through. But there was one kind of silver lining. And that silver lining was I knew he was going into an environment where there were men that I knew who could help guide him and ensure that he came out a different human being. And that's exactly what happened. I guided him with my friends. I sent him books. I encouraged him to further his education. And my little brother, when he walked out of prison, he walked out with a master's degree. I could not have been more excited for him. I surprised him by coming home, because I had moved away from Detroit and moved to LA, but I surprised him and came home to see him on his first week home from prison. And we talked about all the incredible things we were going to get the opportunity to do. In that time span of him being gone away, my life had went from walking out of prison to the heights of society. I was frolicking with Oprah, hanging out with President Obama, making music with Nas, making films with Ava DuVernay, and I could not wait to share all these incredible experiences with my little brother. In fact, when he came home, I was working on my second book, Letters to the Sons of Society. And I was like, man, I finally get this opportunity and this chance to take my brother on this journey with me. And then in July 2021, I got the call that no sibling wants to hear. My brother had been murdered. It was one of the most devastating experiences in my life. And I remember thinking to myself, I have to go home. And then my mind began to click in that operational manner that leaders in the family have, problem solving. I need to go home and help my parents bury my brother. I need to relieve them of the burden to make sure that all the things that need to be taken care of, that I do my job as a diligent son. And so I flew to Detroit, and I went home and spent time with my family and went through all the preparatory things that come with burying a loved one. And when all was said and done, I flew back to LA, and I realized in that moment that I had not grieved. And it wasn't that I hadn't grieved because I had to do my responsibility as a son. I hadn't grieved because I felt guilty. I felt guilty because I knew that I had made somebody feel the heartbreak that my family was now feeling. And so I asked this bigger question: how does one reconcile the feeling of grief and guilt simultaneously? And is it even possible? And so I began this journey of walking myself through grief. And I leaned on my family, my beautiful fiance, my young son, and this incredible, energetic, beautiful puppy we have named Indy. Now, Indy was a very special dog. He's an American bully, weighed about 130 pounds or so. Full of love, full of energy, knocked everything over in the house. He had this quest to pursue paper towel for some reason. You put some paper towel down and you leave Indy unattended, you can be assured that he's going to swallow it. In October that year, we took Indy to a trainer to help us better manage this massive puppy, more so for my young son, who he outweighed by, 60 or 70 pounds. The following day, I get a call. The trainer tells me to meet him at the veterinarian office. When I get there, he tells me that Indy's dead. And then he goes on to tell me that Indy had slipped out of his choke chain that he was using to train him. He attempted to bite a pedestrian and somehow got away, ran into traffic, and got hit. In my gut, I knew that wasn't the truth. And I found myself getting angry. And I was like, okay, I have a responsibility here. I have to be, once again, the shepherd of the family. I have to come home and share with my son what happened, share with my fiance what happened. And so I remember sitting in my truck in tears as I thought about how would that conversation go. And finally, I drove home. I told my fiancée Liz what happened and told her I would tell Sekou in the morning. I'll never forget the gut-wrenching feeling of telling my son that his first puppy had been hit by a car. His response was to cry out Indy's name. And I remember just sitting on the couch and just holding him, and we both crying. And then he said to me, Dad, we're going to get justice for Indy because I don't believe that story that happened. That same day, I'm on IG, scrolling through, and I'll go to the dog trainer's page. And I see him and his daughter playing with their beautiful dog. And I became super angry. I became so angry that I thought about running his dog over with a car. Because I couldn't understand for the life of me as a father how he could lie to our family. And I wanted him to feel the pain and the anger that I felt. But I knew it wasn't the right thing to do. Because for 20 years or so, I had given in to this idea of forgiveness. And I knew that this experience was something that was challenging the principles and values that I had exalted for the past 2 decades. Now, I'm a person that's constantly questioning the universe. Why does these things happen? And as you can imagine, as you all are, we watch things unfold in the world, and most of these things don't seem to make sense to us. But even in the things that don't make sense, I've always believed that there are lessons there. And that this was a lesson that I needed to really think about. But I didn't know how this lesson was going to unfold. And then I reflected on an experience I had with a friend named Rick. I had met Rick back in 1992. We were both in the Michigan Reformatory, and we were neighbors. And Rick had got into some trouble with another guy, and we ended up talking about what led him down the path to that trouble. Rick ended up getting transferred to another prison, and I didn't see Rick again until nearly 20 years later when I got out of prison. I got my first job doing interviews of small local businesses in the city of Detroit. When somebody said, hey, there's a car wash and an owner named Rick that you should go meet. And I remember going up to that car wash, and I saw Rick standing there, and he was just smiling when he saw me. He was like, man, I can't believe you made it out. I was like, man, I can't believe you made it out. And Rick said to me, you know, I've been home for a while, and one of the things that I like to try to do is to make sure people's pathway to home is easy. And I want to help you. And so he bought one of my books, and he told me he'll give me a call in a couple of days once, you know, he was ready to offer his help. And I remember going home and just thinking, okay, well, maybe we will hear from Rick, or maybe not. Because everybody, you know, when you come home wants to adorn you in love and all the things, but, you know, they have lives of their own. But Rick surprised me. He called me. It was like, hey, meet me back up at the car wash. When I went up to the car wash, Rick handed me an envelope. It was an envelope full of cash. And he said, man, get yourself on your feet. I know you're going to need a car. You're going to need a way to get around for work. This is my gift to help you move forward in your life. And I was like, wow, such an incredible, thoughtful human being. Over the course of years, me and Rick, we talk, we hang out periodically. But when I moved away from Detroit, we hadn't communicated much. And then one day, Rick calls me and says, hey, man, I got a letter for you. I was like, why would you have a letter for me? And he said, one of the brothers in the joint wrote me, and he wants to get me to give you this letter. And I'm like, well, what is the letter about, Rick? He's like, I don't know. I haven't opened it up, but I think you should have it. And I said, okay, well, send me the letter. When I got the letter, I opened it up, and it was typed out on some random paper. And if you've ever seen a word processor, it was kind of that type of font. And I opened the letter up. I began to read the letter. And my heart began to beat faster than it's ever beat before. Because the letter was from the man who had shot me when I was 17 years old. A man who for decades face had remained a mystery to me, whose name outside of his street nickname was unclear to me. This man wrote me this letter and said, while having a conversation with another incarcerated man, he was introduced to my book, Righting My Wrongs. And when he began to read the story of my shooting and what that led to in my life, that it shocked him to his core, because he realized in that moment that he was the person responsible for shooting me. I was faced with the ultimate dilemma. Once again, the principles and the values I had exalted for 20 years about forgiveness came face to face. And now I can tell you in honesty and transparency that a full range of emotions overtook me. I was angry. I was transported back to that moment of a 17-year-old kid. I remember the callous nature in which I was treated and handled in a hospital. And I found myself becoming infuriated. And with anger arose a lot of emotions that were very negative and thoughts about what I can make of this man's life while he's incarcerated. Throughout my walk of 19 years, I had garnered a reputation of respect. I became a major shot caller on the yard, and I knew that I held within my abilities the power to determine the outcomes of his life on the inside. But the values, the principles, the idea of forgiveness was such a prominent force in my life that I decided to write him a letter back. And in that letter, I began to express to him the spirit of gratitude that I now have the opportunity to live in as a result of this gift that he has given me of being able to put a face with the person who had remained a mystery for so long. That's the power of forgiveness. It creates an opportunity for our own growth. Little did I know that that opportunity was going to increase in value in the coming months. In December of 2022, I had my mother join me on a trip down to Florida. We went to a conservatory called White Oaks, where they have incredible animals who are under duress because of our inability to coexist with all the other beautiful species on the earth. It's this incredible group of people. They have put forth energy, effort, and resources to ensure that these animals have a life and that they can continue to procreate and hopefully be reintroduced into the wild at some point. During this trip, I got this opportunity to spend intimate time with my mother, learning her story, unpacking the pain of our childhood. For anyone who knows my work, if you've read Right and My Wrongs, the story of my family is one of a great deal of turmoil. I grew up in a very abusive household. My mother was physically abusive, verbally abusive, and emotionally abusive. And so we've been on this healing journey. And so I decided to lean deeper into forgiveness by inviting my mother on this trip. And I got a chance to watch my mother feed giraffes. I got a chance to watch my mother conquer her fear and rub animals that she had never saw in person before. I got a chance to watch my mother play with rhinoceros and hold my son's hand as they looked at the elephants. I got a chance to ride up and down the river with my mother, listening to music and laughter. And my favorite memory of that experience was sitting alongside the river, just her and I, as she told me stories about her childhood. For years, I had talked about how hurt people hurt people. But I had never thought about my mother as a hurt person who had caused hurt. And I got a chance to hear her story of how she was taken advantage of when she was a young girl, of how many times she had been assaulted, of her volatile first marriage, and how all those things shaped the mother and the woman she had become. By the time I left that experience, I had a deeper understanding of what forgiveness is. Forgiveness to me is rooted in empathy, compassion, and most importantly, context. My mother gave me context, and that context led me to understanding the power and the beauty of joy. Now, I've been out of prison now for 13 years, and I have had one of the most incredible second acts of my life. But I haven't always enjoyed it. Sometimes when big moments happen, My mind is so focused on making sure everybody else is taken care of, making sure that I'm focused on what the next moment is, as opposed to being fully present in the joy of the experience. When I sat riverside with my mother, I experienced the deepest, most profound sense of joy. I got a chance to see beyond the facade of this hardened woman who had been through so many things in life. And I got a chance to meet the little curious girl that she once was. I got a chance to meet the incredible storyteller she is. I got a chance to meet the comedian she is. And it was so fulfilling because for the first time in over 40 years, I had a chance to be a joyful little boy. My work today is about helping people understand that through all the things that we go through, how to just be. How to be in love, how to be in anger, how to be in grief, how to be in forgiveness. I believe that's my divine calling. So what does joy look like for me today? Joy looks like this room. People who are purpose-aligned, value-aligned, and curious enough to figure out how to show up in the world that's additive. That's what joy feels like to me. But joy also feels like this. Sometime in the fall of 2020, I got a text message. When I opened the text message up, it said, "Hey, would you be interested in contributing something to this song I'm working on?" And I was like, holy shit. One of the greatest, most profound artists in the history of music in general, and in the history of hip hop specifically, was inviting me to be a part of his album. That text message was from Nas. I had a personal experience in terms of how impactful Nas had been in my life. In 1994, when his seminal album Illmatic dropped, I was in prison. And I read about it in the Source magazine because we didn't have access to all of the things that was happening via TV. I had never heard of this artist. All I saw was that he got 5 mics. And it made me curious, and I remember ordering the tape. For those who are like not young, a tape is this little thing that we used to get our music through. And I remember plugging the tape in and listening to the album, and it gets to this song, One Love. In the opening line, "What up, kid? I know shit is hard doing your bid. When the cops came, you should have slid to my crib." I was like, holy shit. He's writing a letter to a friend who was incarcerated. At that point in my life, all of my friends had left my side. And it blew my mind that this young artist who was 17 years old had the foresight and the forethought to actually write about an incarcerated friend. And so I decided that I needed to go get a tattoo of Illmatic on my arm. Now, as you can imagine, there were no tattoo parlors inside prison. And so I went up to the recreation center, and I went into the shoe room where we would do tattoos. And the shoe room had a variety of usages. Sometimes it was a fight club. Sometimes it was a speakeasy for our prison-made wine. And in this case, it was a tattoo parlor. So I get excited, and I pay this guy like $6 worth of store goods, soaps, and ramen noodles. And he begins to tattoo, or rather what I should say, he begins to butcher my arm. He has this very crude tattoo gun. It's just like jugging in my arm. And so he made the worst tattoo ever. This is what it comes down to, people here. Let's just be honest with you. So for some reason, I was like, I want Illmatic, and then I also want a dog biting through a chain. What I ended up getting was some blurry words where ill is on one side, it's supposed to be Matic on the other side, and a dog that looks more like a bear. But it's my favorite and most important tattoo because many years later, I was able to tell Nas that story. And when me and Nas first met in person, it was the coolest exchange and it was the most black exchange. I don't know how any of y'all in here know what happens when two black people meet each other that don't know each other. We hit each other with this, and then it's like we found. And so I see Nas, Nas sees me, what up? And that was it. That was our first meeting. Second meeting, I actually was with some friends. Well, I'm gonna just tell y'all this. This is fucking crazy. I was with some friends, but we also had Quincy Jones with us, Fab Five Freddy, and QD3. And we went and picked Nas up to take him to a concert. And we had a party bus. And we had like a lot of tequila prior to getting into the party bus, so it was a real party bus. And so we go and we pick Nas up at the hotel, and when he comes out, he's just laughing uncontrollably. He's like, yo, nobody has picked me up like this since 1996. And so we go to the concert, and Nas says, you have to join on stage. You have to come up. And so I just remember standing there on stage as Nas went through his catalog. And when he got to One Love, he asked everybody in the audience who had a loved one incarcerated to hold their phone up in the air. And I just saw these lights beaming all through the crowd. And I was like, man, this is so beautiful. And it's so powerful. And so when he finally asked me to join him for the song, I was like, it was the most unbelievable moment ever. And I was like, of course I would be honored. And I was like, when do you need it by? He was like, well, I'm actually in the studio now, so if you can get it to me in the next hour or so, that would be great. And I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? So I'm like, okay, let me get my shit together. Now, this is during the pandemic, so there's nobody home but me, so I'm just like, yo, this is the craziest thing ever. And so I went to work, and I just recorded, and I sent it to him. And he was like, thank you. This is poetry. I'll see what my producer has to say about it. I was like, cool. And so I don't hear from Nas for a long time. So I was like, I didn't make the cut. It's all good. But at least I have a copy of the text message that I've been invited to do a song with Nas. Fast forward, I see the rollout of the album, King's Disease 2. And the cover of the album cover is this beautiful orange, this beige, and it's an image of Nas. And I was like, wow. It reminds me of this book cover that I was working on at the time. And I was like, man, that's just a powerful, divine connection. And so I say to Nas, I sent him a text, I said, man, just saw the album cover. Check out the book cover, man, like we're aligned. He was like, oh yeah, man, I can't wait till you hear our song. I was like, what the fuck? And so fast forward, the album drops. And I remember nervously waiting to hear my voice alongside the voice of arguably one of the greatest MCs ever. And when it opened up, the opening line was, keep your composure. Believe in the magic of who you are. And that's what I'm inviting you all to do today, is to keep your composure, believe in the magic of who you are, be present in your joy, acknowledge those that you need to forgive, acknowledge your own anger, accept that grief is a part of the human journey. And if you can do those things, you'll essentially, truly, and honorably learn how to be. Thank y'all so much for your time. So to continue this conversation, I'm going to invite a friend of mine who is doing some of the most inspiring work in the world, helping wrongfully convicted people get free of prison, and we're going to have a great conversation. So Mike, please join me on the stage. How's it going, bro?
Awesome talk.
Thank you.
So first, I just want to thank you, Shaka, for sharing your story, telling us some of the more traumatic things that have happened, and there are many traumatic things that have happened to you.
Yeah.
You have lived a hard life, and I can only imagine how hard it is to not just have lived this life, but to continue to get up in front of people and share your story. So, thank you.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, I want to start by asking how you're able to do all this, because I don't know if I've been into a bunch of prisons. Prisons aren't exactly the place where you go, like you talked about this morning. Rehabilitation is an afterthought.
Yeah.
It's a tough place. How do you go to prison, spend 7 years in solitary, spend 19 years in, and you're able to come out and accomplish so much? So how have you done that?
Yeah. So thank you. First of all, that's a great question. You know, I would start with saying that I was fortunate. You know, I have experienced more miracles in my life than is imaginable. And one of the greatest miracles that I experienced while I was incarcerated was meeting some of the most incredible mentors. These were men who were serving life sentences. These were men who were sentenced to die in prison. And they saw something redeemable in me. And they guided me to books. And those books just cracked my mind open and just showed me that the world was full of possibilities. And within that experience, I recognized how blessed I was to be literate. The average reading grade level in prison is 3rd grade. And so just to have the gift of literacy was an impactful part of my life. And then I'll say the third thing is that I am infinitely curious. I love to learn. I love to challenge myself on, you know, what's possible. You know, we get this one precious life, and, you know, if you're fortunate to have, you know, that epiphany of like, I got to get out of the rat race and get present with what my life really is, that's when the magic happens. So I would say, you know, maintain your curiosity. Don't let your work kill that. Don't let relationships kill that. Don't let responsibility kill that. If you maintain curiosity, man, the world of possibilities that it opens up is incredible.
Yeah, no, and we see that in all of your work.
Yeah, thank you.
And I've seen that too as far as literacy is concerned. Most of the clients that are getting in touch with us have somewhere between maybe a 5th grade education, 8th grade at best, and it's a really challenging thing. So literacy's, I mean, it's awesome that you were able to do what you were able to do. You didn't talk in your talk today about meeting President Obama. Can you talk to us about that? What was that moment like?
Man, it was surreal. And just to give context, like I am probably the one person who does not care about politics the way that most people that are adults do. I don't have time for that type of stress in my life. So, you know, I do vote, just to be clear. I do take advantage of that freedom. But I don't typically care about politicians or what they're talking about. What I've always admired about Obama is just the audacity to do a thing, right? So I was always just like fascinated by this man who was like, you know, I'm gonna run for president. It's never been a black president. I might as well try it, you know? And to actually execute it, I was like, wow, this is brilliant. And I remember prior to getting paroled, I was reading his book, The Audacity of Hope, and I saw one of his talks, and I was just like, man, this is fascinating because I really am curious about people who see a challenge, see a goal that seems impossible, and then they go out to actually do it. And so the first time I met President Obama, you know, y'all see that flex right there, the first time I met him. Just want y'all to be clear, I'll be out here meeting presidents and shit. But the first time was really unexpected. I was actually with a friend of mine, and I was on book tour for Righting My Wrongs, the paperback version, and I invited my friend to this party. He was like, man, I don't think I'm gonna be able to make it because I'm supposed to meet with President Obama. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm gonna get bumped for anybody, I can kind of, it's okay, I give you a pass. He was like, but the next day I'm gonna, he ended up calling me back and was like, actually, I'm gonna cancel that dinner with Obama because I know how important it is to show up for you and be there for you. And I was like, man, such an incredible friend. I don't know if I would have did that shit, but great friend you are. No, but I would definitely do it for him. But he was like, but I'm going to pay my respects to Valerie Jarrett the next day. And so I'm on book tour. I'm doing interviews via phone and in person. And he's like, yo, just roll with me over here. I'm going to stop by, see Valerie Jarrett, and we're going to keep on, about our business. And so he did. He stopped by. I'm in a car on an interview. I'm literally doing a live interview on radio, and I'm getting texts from his wife. She's like, yo, hey, can you come in the lobby? And I'm like, okay, but I'm like on this thing. She's like, no, it's actually important. It's urgent to come in the lobby, So I come in the lobby, and when I get in the lobby, she's like, President Obama wants to meet you. I was like, what? And so I walk in, and he's like, I heard you got a book. It's like, yes, Mr. President, I do got a book. And he was like, so the president can't get a book? I was like, of all the days that I do not have a book on me, and he was like, all right. I was like, well, Mr. President, I'll make sure you get a book. The following year, I was invited to be the keynote speaker at his kickoff of My Brother's Keeper, and I got a chance to meet President Obama again for the second time and gift him a copy of the book that I hope he's read at this point.
I'm sure he has.
Yeah. So that was my meeting President Obama.
Wow. Now, I know you had twice been to the White House.
Yeah.
I want you to tell us about the first time that you went and what happened outside, because I think it's important. Because I think it really kind of sets the tone for the way that we as a country treat people that are formerly incarcerated.
Yeah. So at the time, I was the director of operations and strategy for an organization called Cut 50, which some of you may know is an organization founded by Van Jones, Jessica Jackson, who now runs Reform Alliance, and Matt Haney, who's doing something up in San Fran in politics. And we were invited, to the White House as part of this criminal justice initiative where they were talking about how do we change laws to make sure that people are being returned to their family? How do we, navigate the system in a way that creates helpful outcomes for people? And so we get there, and I do have the anxiety of a formerly incarcerated person where I kind of check things over and over and over to make sure. So I'm literally like emailing these people like, are y'all sure y'all inviting me personally, not just, it seems like, oh no, we want you to come to the White House. I'm like, okay, email again. Are y'all absolutely certain that I am the person that you want to come to the White House? Absolutely, Shaka, we can't wait to see you. And so that morning, prior to getting to DC, we were in New York, Van, myself and Matt, fundraising for our work in Cut 50. We literally leave New York, get to DC. Van used to work in the White House, so he went through a different door. And then me and Matt, we were on our way in, and I was like, Matt, you go first. So Matt goes up, the guy grabs his ID, checks him off the list, and then I walk up, I give him my ID, the guy grabs my ID, looks at the list, looks at my ID, looks at the list. I was like, I am not getting in the White House today. This is clear to me, And sure enough, he told me that, they didn't have me on the list. I go through my email, I'm like, here's the actual list. My team is actually coordinate this. I know I'm on the list. He's like, well, you're not on our list. And so they denied me entry, and so I text Van, who, I knew he was in, he was going to be on the panel in there. I text him, and fortunately, he got my text before he got on stage. And he was on stage in a conversation being moderated by Angie Martinez. And in the midst of that conversation, he's just talking about how important criminal justice is. And he said to the audience that actually the person who should be talking about this is stuck outside right now because y'all won't let him in. And so the White House was not happy with Van, calling him out publicly, but it was one of the greatest testaments of his leadership in the space, and just a great testament of honor and respect as a friend that he knew I was out there being, degraded. I've come all the way across the country, and I want to come in service of people who are incarcerated. And Of course, the White House got right on it, so they ended up, coming out, rushing out to get me, and I walk in, and all these people are like, "Okay, this is the guy," and so I'm getting right up to the line where I'm supposed to meet Obama then, and that didn't happen. But then they invited me back a year later. They had changed the rules, which was great.
Maybe because of this.
Because of this incident, they actually told me that they changed it because of this incident. So more system impacted people were able to join us in the White House. And I actually knew a lady who worked there. And so she gave me a unapproved tour. And I had my book with me. And so I literally photobombed the White House with my book. So I have like I have pictures of my book in the White House and like all type of places that it's not supposed to be.
Awesome.
I was like, y'all take that for leaving me outside. So yeah, that was my second experience. Yeah,
That's great.
right.
We should talk about what it's like to get out of prison. You've done incredible work. There's an organization called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition that Shaka was the executive director of for a little while. They're an organization that assists formerly incarcerated people in their reentry. Talk to us about the challenges. Talk to us what it's like when you get out, and just some of the things that you've experienced.
Oh man, it is incredibly tough. I'm always mindful of the great fortune that my life has become, but I'm also honest about how difficult it has been to make a life for myself. And a lot of the difficulties are in the unexpected realities that you face when you're out. I've met with every type of rejection you can imagine. There's still penalties and consequences for having a felony, despite me being at this stage of life and my career. There's places I can't go.
Like Canada, we should change that
there's
for
a lot of
Canadians.
and Canadians here. I'm not allowed into Canada, which is, was mind blowing because I spoke at TED's 30th anniversary when they first moved to Vancouver, and I couldn't do that talk in Vancouver, so I had to stream it live from New York. There's things. I bought a home in 2019, and I called to get insurance, and my insurance company would not insure me because I have a felony. And so I had to work over and over until finally found somebody to insure my home. And so there's just tons of things that's more like on that level. But then there's the personal reality of like unpacking all of the traumatic events of life on the inside and, the pain of it. And so what I try to advocate for, even in my leadership when I was at ARC, was that we be a little bit more thoughtful about what the needs of people are coming home. And especially now where criminal justice is at an all-time high in terms of the conversations we're having. People are getting released now. We're doing incredible work, but oftentimes we're not really thinking about how people's transition home is. To newly discover that you're now capable of making decisions, you have agency over your life, and how confusing that can be. There were tons of things that I had to navigate. I mean, like the first year or so, I probably ate mostly hamburgers and wingdings because that's like I just couldn't decide on a menu. And so it's like all these nuanced things, having to learn technology. I talk about that in my TED Talk where I just kind of talk about I kind of was like Fred Flintstone stepping into an episode of the Jetsons. You're coming out this very archaic, barbaric environment into this world of technology. And people are just like, oh, it's just this simple and it's really hard. And so even now, some of the guys coming home, we spend like days talking about how to work a phone, and I try to help walk them through it so that they're not overwhelmed. And so the type of support that's needed is unbelievable. We need to really be thoughtful about people as they're getting out of prison.
Yeah, there's something that you said that I've seen quite a bit, which is the difficulty in making a choice.
Yeah.
Because you don't have choices to
Yeah.
make in prison. You're told what to do. You're given only one option.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the hard part about it. Is like you get out and now you have to make all of these choices. You have to figure out how to navigate your own time and how to navigate family. Everybody's excited. The first 2 weeks of getting out of prison is actually kind of lit. Like everybody's throwing a party, they're barbecuing. You're seeing all the people from your past, your childhood friends, your ex-girlfriends, and so it's really energetically, it's celebratory, right? Family is happy to have you home, you're happy to be home, but then life gets real.
They go back to living their
Go
life.
back to living their life, and you don't even understand that life. Dating is very complex. You get out, and I went in as a kid when I was 19. I was 19 years old. I had never dated like a grown woman. I was a street hustler, so I had a lot of other type of relationships with grown women that weren't healthy and were toxic. And so I came home to like trying to be like a partner in a relationship that I wasn't emotionally evolved enough to be at that time. And so it's those nuanced things we don't think about. And I was very ambitious, and I had these big dreams, and I really thought society was a lot more forgiving. Like if you served your time, I thought in my naivete that society was like, hey, you serve your time, you're ready to be a contributing member, we're gonna help set you up for success so that you don't come back, and it was the complete opposite.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I want to open up to the audience to ask some questions. If you haven't read Shaka's book, Letters to the Sons of Society, please do pick it up. He talks a lot about the stuff we've talked about already, but goes into more detail. But if there's questions out there people want to ask, please do.
And don't be shy.
Be shy. Shaka's nice.
Just give me 1 second to get to you. I'll
Sure.
We got
share
a
the mic
mic.
so people.
It's hard for us to see, but I
Yeah,
think
we
we have somebody back there that can see.
Who had a question over here?
Did you find out what happened to the dog?
Yes, so it turns out that they were negligent, and they actually had left a gate unlocked, and he got out and he ran out into traffic and got ran over. And so we ended up suing them, and we just settled with them. And the interesting thing about that whole process was like, as angry as I was, like I didn't want to like destroy their career, but I thought it was important to get justice for Indy because he was such a beautiful part of our family, and we still miss him dearly.
Thank you.
And thank you for that question.
Did you get an apology from the trainers at all?
I don't think they apologized, but they did send a check, so I'll take that.
Take that, yeah.
So I feel your pain about the American bully. I have a blue heeler American bully mix. She's adorable, but she's a monster. Yeah. So I understand that. But my question is something slightly different. As a mother of a son, he's amazing. He's awesome, but he's a monster. He's 4. If he was in here, he would be jumping on every single table at the moment, And I'm at this point as a mom, I'm trying to figure out like, I can't negotiate with him, but I don't want to be constantly screaming at him either, So as a parent, to your sons, how do you kind of get through to them without wringing their neck and strangling them? Just completely separate, off topic, but as a mother who's trying to raise a healthy, productive son in society, help me out here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love talking about parenting. It's literally one of my favorite topics. I love being a dad, and I learned there's an incredible woman that I really love how she approaches parenting. She wrote a book called The Conscious Parent, Dr. Shafali. And one of the things that I try to do is what's called egoless parenting. And some people may see it as the parent that just does not care about most things. But what I realize is that as a dad, sometime, and as I'm sure as a mother this is true, we attach expectations to our children that's really about our own anxiety. And so early on, I just started to think about what are some small ways that I can ensure, 1, that my son has agency over his life, and 2, that I don't lose my mind while trying to parent this kid. And so, mismatched shoes, guess who doesn't care? Dad, you've twirled in a circle for the 1,000th time, guess who's not gonna look over there because he doesn't care? Dad, you wanna draw on your clothes? I don't have to wear them. So a lot of it to me is like those things are symbolic of letting go and recognizing that my son is on his own unique journey. And then to also check in with myself. I'm constantly checking in with myself and asking, is this about me or is this really about what's in the best interest of my child? So egoless parenting is what is, I consider it. A great example right now is my son has taken an interest in playing flag football. And I think part of that driver is he know I love sports. But I have always been like, I'm not going to over insert that part of my personality into his life. And so I just kind of let him do his thing, and so it's, it can be tough sometimes. You see your kid out there struggling with a thing and you really want to lean in and help them and make it better. But for me, it's like, dude, you can be the crappiest football player ever. I don't care. You're my son and I love you solely, because of that. And so I just try to take my ego out as much as possible.
That was an awesome answer. He also, in the book, if you,
We have
you got a
someone
question
right
right there? Yeah, we have a question up front. Oh, you're going to the back. He also has some affirmations he says to his son every night that are in the book, and you should all get the book and read them because they're incredible.
Okay, I can see like this now.
Hey, Shaka.
Hey, how's it going?
Really good, man. You're at a conference speaking to lawyers, many of whom I'm assuming in this room would be criminal lawyers. As someone who has been incarcerated for the amount of time you have, also been exposed to a lot of individuals that have been through that process and experienced that pain, what would you say to the lawyers in the room that have the opportunity to be zealous advocates for those that may be facing that potential reality based on the charges they're facing?
It's a great question. When I think about this conference, one of the reasons that this conference is one of my favorites is because of actually the audience. And I know I get this opportunity to spend time with such incredible leaders across many sectors of the legal profession. What I try to really convince people of is to lead with your humanity and then also to protect your own humanity. Oftentimes you all are tasked with the responsibility of stepping into somebody's life that's in complete shambles. People who have been through the worst of whatever the experiences that led them to you actually meeting. And you can feel the pressure and responsibility to fix everything in their life. And the reality is you can't, but I think the things that you can fix, and that's part of your responsibility, if you lean into that with your humanity, I think you just produce different outcomes, and you think about who would you want to advocate for you, and how would you want someone to advocate for you. It's one of the most important roles you can have in life to me, is to be an advocate for somebody else. And it shows up whether it's in parenting, whether it's in coaching, education, or a profession such as yours, where you are an advocate, meaning that people are entrusting you to help, with the outcomes of their lives. And then the other part of that, the protection piece, which I don't think we talk enough about, is when you're doing this kind of work, this is hard work. There's no getting around it. It's hard work. And the idea that you detach your emotions from how hard it is, to me, I don't think it's the healthiest thing. And so I think that to acknowledge that it's difficult work and to make sure you're giving yourself the grace and the permission to step outside of that work so that you can show up in it fully and emotionally and intellectually, I just think it creates a better work experience. I think it creates a better outcome for your clients. And I think it helps you maintain your sanity, because if you all are not good, there's no way that your clients are going to be good. So I'm a big advocate for taking care of yourself, for turning the work off whenever you have the opportunity. And I noticed, because I led an organization that, we had over 2,000 members who were formerly system impacted, and oftentimes they would pack into my office and just regurgitate all of the traumatic shit that they were going through, and I was left to navigate that while still navigating my own, and I burnt out in that work. And so I was like, I think before I get to a space where I don't want to be an advocate anymore, it was best for me to lead that work, and that was kind of the way that I was able to protect myself so that I can be a better advocate, just in a different way.
We've got time. There's one right there.
A lot of your talk today has been centered around forgiveness, forgiveness of the person who shot you and forgiveness of society towards you as a convicted felon. My question for you is, when did you forgive yourself? When did that take place, and was there a catalyst for that? And was that easier or harder than the forgiveness that you had to give to others?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think self-forgiveness is always the hardest. I know in my experience, I've always been my harshest critic. I have also been, very hard on myself by internalizing narratives that didn't, belong to me. One of the things there were two things that actually helped me arrive at a sense of feeling worthy of forgiveness, which I think we don't talk enough about. It's like, in order to really embrace the idea that you have been forgiven, because somebody can say the words, but you still have the negative narrative running. In order to embrace those words, you have to feel like you're worthy of it. And I think that's one of the most profound gifts I've ever been given, and it was through the woman who raised David, whose life I'm responsible for taking. And she wrote me this profound letter, and we began to correspond over time. And I just remember her, talking to me and just reminding me that I was a kid. And early on, I was very resistant to that. I'm like, no, I did a bad thing. I'm a bad person. And she was like, you were a 19-year-old kid who was hurt and had trauma and PTSD. And so her willingness to lean in into the breakthrough made me feel worthy of like, man, somebody actually really does care. And so that was the kind of mechanism that helped me to embrace it. But then it became a long journey, right? There's things that come up. I mean, people have said some of the most mean-spirited, harmful, hateful things possible, and it can trigger those old feelings of like, man, nobody will ever stop identifying you as such, right? And then when you look at society and the way that we're treated and we're handled, and this is not like, it's not about sympathy. Like, my life is amazing, right? It's just about how we're set up to where we're constantly reminded of our worst moment. Sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. You can go into a space and you have to think about, man, am I going to be able to get in there when they discover this thing happens, right? And so the way that society is situated, we're constantly being reminded of like, our worst moments. And even in casual conversations, like people are, talking about what's happening, with the crimes that are happening, and they may not know that you're formerly incarcerated, and they have formulated opinions about people who commit crimes or people who are in prison. So I'm constantly going back to that well of like, I'm worthy of forgiveness, and the gratitude that I operate in, that I have the opportunity to forgive others. It just keeps that cycle renewed and fresh, but it's constantly being challenged. And what I say about my work now, as I'm focusing on this third book, the big idea for me is like learning how to be in all the iterations of who we are. Thank you for that question.
So we got about a minute and a half. I want to give Shaka a chance to say some final words. He's got a book signing, so if you all haven't bought the book, please buy the book and please go and get him to sign a copy. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you all, I'm the executive director of the Innocence Center. Please go to theinnocencecenter.org and help me free some more wrongfully convicted people. And Shaka, if you want to take the last minute to give us your final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm really thankful for Clio Cloud Conference and just this incredible work. I'm thankful for everybody who's present in this room. I know there's tons of things you had to choose for, and the fact that you chose to spend time with me is truly an honor. Definitely follow my work, stay up to date on what I'm doing. I am moving into a different part of my career, which I'm super excited about, doing a lot of executive coaching, a lot of one-on-one coaching around the art of storytelling. So if you think I can be additive to your work, don't hesitate to reach out and figure out a way to connect around that. And most importantly, take in all of this incredible energy that's happening here. Make sure you're taking that back to wherever you're from. And we keep having to keep these conversations going. They're just too important to miss out on. And again, thank you all for joining me. I look forward to seeing you over at the book signing. I think that's happening around 1 o'clock or so. And if I don't catch you there, I'm sure I'll catch you somewhere where we'll be having tequila shots, because My work here is almost done, but thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Mike. Man, really
That was awesome.
appreciate you, bro.
It was great.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Now I gotta.